Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. Today we'll be discussing about the EnGenius Cloud Security Gateway that we have recently launched. For those who are not aware, we have information that we have updated on the EnGenius.ai webpage. So if you need information about the cloud, like the specs and everything about the gateway, you can get it from there. The data sheet is not yet available, but we'll be launching that sometime mid this month. So let me go ahead and start. If you need a recap, by the way, this video would be recorded and is also available through the EnGenius Academy. If you haven't signed up, EnGenius Academy is our portal for all our trainings as well as archived webinars. So that's across the world. So if you want to attend webinars from other regions, you can sign up and view the previous recordings as well. So EnGenius Cloud is continuously expanding. So like now we have added a new line of product as part of the EnGenius Cloud solution, which is the cloud security gateways. Now going straight at it, I'll be talking about the ESG510. This is our first entry to the EnGenius Cloud security gateway lineup, but it's no means an entry-level device. So talking about the hardware, the ESG510 is equipped with a quad-core CPU. This is so that it can process all of those SPI firewall information. It's also equipped with a TPM chipset for enhanced security. For the memory, it has 4 gigabytes of LPDDR4 RAM. So this one is used for the concurrent sessions, so we can have a lot. If not mistaken, the total concurrent TCP sessions for the ESG510 is 1 million. And then it comes with 8 gigabytes of storage to ensure that you have enough space for your logs. And one thing I want to highlight are the ports. Now, these are equipped with 4 ports. All of them are multi-G, 2.5 gigabytes for the WAN as well as on the LAN side. So you have dual WAN slots. The other one of those WAN are auto switching. So it can either be a LAN to act as your LAN number 3 or a secondary WAN for load balancing or failover. Now, most of the routers in the market or the gateway systems, when other brands launch it, they may have a 2.5G WAN, but the LAN ports are all gigabit. Now, for some clients that may be okay. Maybe they can split one connection going to a PC, another port going to a switch. But if they are using 2.5G internet speed from their ISP and they want to fully utilize the whole speed, if your LAN port is just gigabit, then that's going to be a bottleneck. So here for the ESG510, it's all 2.5G. So there's no bottleneck at all. It's also equipped with a USB 3.0 port to act as a third failover for cellular. So let's say you have 2 WAN ports, both ISPs die for some reason, then at least you still have a third failover in case that happens. So it can be a 4G dongle, 5G dongle, or a 3G dongle. So we support maybe about 400 different types of dongles in the market. So no issues with compatibility. And of course, for other configuration, we have a console port as well. This is a desktop type device, by the way. So when it comes to the features, of course, this is part of our cloud solution. So this is cloud managed. Again, nice thing about the cloud solution is that it's all easy in terms of configuration, monitoring. If you have multiple branches, you can all do it on the go. So I'll discuss more about that in a while. Again, it has dual WAN ports for load balancing or failover. And then you have your cellular failover for the USB slot. It supports one-to-one or one-to-many NAT. It also supports auto mesh VPN, which I'll also talk about in a while. It supports VLAN, stateful firewall, and captive portal as well. Now, being part of the cloud solution means we're going to have integration between the gateway, our access points, and the switches as well. For configuration, we'll be having options that would apply straight away throughout the devices that you have. Also with a cloud, this makes it a lot easier for managing so that you don't have to worry about maintenance. You don't have to worry about firmware upgrades. Everything is set on the cloud. For load balancing and failover, when we talk about multi-WAN solutions, it's quite rare in the market to find a device that have multiple WAN ports. So much more having load balancing functions. Most of the time, if there are multiple LAN or WAN ports, those are only used for failover. So through load balancing, we use weighted round robin to ensure that both of your ISPs are utilized for both WANs. And in the event of one of them going offline, basically it acts as a failover as well. So that this can minimize the downtime that you would have, especially in critical areas where you really need internet or network communication outside. For the USB slot, like I mentioned, it supports any type of dongle, 3G, 4G, or 5G connection, which acts as your third failover or your main source of links in case there is no ISP available in the area. Maybe only a cellular connectivity is available in that specific region. So you can utilize this port as well. So for other deployments, this can act as a great way of failover to ensure that there is totally no downtime. So maybe you have three ISPs. One is for the WAN port, another one maybe for fiber, another one for DSL. Then the third one can be through mobile data, just to ensure that you have a continuous connection. If let's say you're using this gateway for VPN access or just for normal internet traffic, but you really require internet in that location without having to have any downtime because of your SLA to the end users. So this would be a great addition as well. By the way, if you have any questions, you can just type it on chat or on the QA function of Zoom, and then later on I'll go over them. So, like I mentioned, the ESG510 is equipped with multi-gigabit ports. So all the ports from the WAN side to the LAN side are multi-G. So not only can you fully utilize your ISP speed here with this gateway, but you can also use this for your intranet connection. Let's say LAN to LAN, maybe you have a server connected on one of the ports. If you have a Wi-Fi 6 access point, Wi-Fi 6E access point, then you can fully utilize the speed of that AP as well. The other port I forgot to mention is PoE plus capable as well. So you can also directly power up a unit from here. So let's say you're pairing this with our multi-gigabit switches or our Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 6E AP, you would be able to fully utilize that speed of that device since there would be no bottlenecks on the system. With the multi-gig ports as well, this can ensure that your firewall data can maximize the throughput that you have. So with the EnGenius stateful firewall, this can make a great addition in terms of protecting the clients from outdoor threats as well as from the local side as well. In the next update, we'll be adding further security to enhance the security functions of this device. For example, I'm not sure of the schedule yet, but it's already on the roadmap. We'll be adding IDS and IPS functions. We'll also be adding content filtering so that you can specify which specific applications, for instance, you want to block on the network, on the location. Sorry, let me go back to the firewall. I just want to highlight the throughput of the firewall side. So based on the testing of our team, internal testing, if you have the stateful firewall enabled, your throughput would still be very high on the network. So with most of the brands, because of the CPU type that they're using, maybe they're using a dual core CPU or mobile processor CPU, it can suffer a lot. I mean, it can affect the throughput a lot if you enable the firewall. So with EnGenius, if you have the stateful firewall enabled on the system, even if you have a lot of policies enabled, you can still output about 4 gigabytes of data. So that's over the LAN and the WAN side as well. So with the gateway function, most of the time people would use a gateway for VPN connections. So the ESG510 supports both site-to-site VPN connections as well as client VPN connections. So that is running, you can have this running simultaneously as well. So maybe you have multiple sites, you have a branch to branch link so that you can have a shared server, shared inventory system, or shared NAS, for instance. And then for some locations or for some of the other staff, maybe they are remote. They don't have an ESG with them or a third party gateway to connect back through VPN. So they can use any device that supports IPsec VPN, like directly from their mobile phone, directly from the Windows client. So they can connect directly to the ESG to establish that VPN connection to get the files that they need. Or maybe they want to push something to the server for collaboration with the other staff. So you can easily do that through the EnGenius gateway. One thing nice about our VPN solution is that if you're using ESGs across your networks, it's as simple as enabling the function because we have auto mesh VPN on the system. Let me show you guys that real quick. Let me jump to the user interface. Just a moment. So on the user face on the cloud portal, you would see a new option here under management, which is the gateway once we have it enabled. And then under configuration, you would have more options on the gateway system. To enable VPN, if you are using, let's say, EnGenius gateways on multiple branches, if they are on the same organization, it's as simple as enabling site-to-site VPN and hit apply. So once you do that, all the ESGs that are on each of your networks would auto link to each other. So basically, you just need to ensure that your LAN subnet is all different to avoid conflicts. Now, once you enable Mesh VPN, you would have access to all your branches. The local network, of course, you can still configure what they have access to. You can filter that out through the outbound rules. So you can add specific applications that you want to block or allow for access. And basically, that's it. So you would see the status of your VPN connection under management, under VPN status. I don't have a pair right now because sadly I only have one unit. But I have already tested this with one of our peers in Europe. And the VPN connection was pretty straightforward and smooth. So again, the only requirement to establish the VPN connection if you're using EnGenius gateways is basically that all devices would be on the same organization on different networks. Once you enable Mesh VPN, that's it. It would automatically be connected. Of course, not everyone would have an ESG gateway. Some may be using third-party brands. And maybe you don't want to share access to other branches as well. Maybe you want one main site, maybe your HQ, for branches to access to, but inter-branch, you don't want to have them access. So you can enable hub and spoke. Here, what's going to happen is that for hub and spoke, you would choose one as a hub. Let's say this one is in HQ. For the rest that will connect to that hub, you can set them up as a spoke. So basically for the spoke, it acts similarly to a client VPN. It will link back to the main ESG. And then from there, he would be able to connect to that network. So if you have, again, EnGenius gateways, they would all be presented here under your hub. So you can select which one you want to connect to. If you are using a third-party gateway or you want to connect to a third-party gateway, so you can also add that third-party gateway here. You just have to fill in the information like public IP, security type, the policies, encryption, etc. So that's one advantage if you're using EnGenius gateway is that you only have to select Mesh VPN and apply. You don't even have to do port forwarding. You can also set it to automatic NAT traversal so that the port forwarding will be done by the system. So since all the gateways is under EnGenius Cloud, the cloud will capture all the information in terms of the IP addresses, WAN IP, local IP. Encryption will automatically be set by the system as well. And basically that's it. Everything would be automatically connected. By the way, in case of any changes on the network, since this is running on Mesh VPN, it's auto healing as well. So meaning if the WAN IP changes, if the client is using a dynamic IP on one of its sites, or if there have been changes on the router's port forwarding settings, your gateway would still automatically link again because the cloud will be updating all the gateways that are being managed on the system. So with EnGenius ESG510, it also supports pass-through mode. So this is usually used if, for instance, they already have an existing gateway on the system and they can't change or don't want to change that device. Maybe it's already fixed. They already have their IP addresses and everything. They don't want to bother into changing that. But for instance, they still need a firewall. They need VPN access. So you can set up the EnGenius ESG510 as pass-through mode so that it can function as a firewall or captive portal or maybe for VPN services, even through a router. So regardless of what the setup of the client is, if they're going to use this as the main router or it's going to be behind another NAT, so we can work through that through the different options that we have on the system. So with cloud management, since we have an application called EnGenius Cloud to Go, you would be able to fully configure your gateway from there as well. So everything on the gateway, like what you have with the access point and the switches, let's say port configuration, WAN configuration, or even other options that you want to configure on the gateway, such as the captive portal, you would fully be able to monitor and configure from the application as well. So this makes it a lot easier for clients to manage and monitor different sites. Let me share more information about the user interface. I'll try to walk you guys a bit. So on the gateway side, like I mentioned, we support different types of modes. So we have a routed mode or a pass-through mode. Let's say you want to use this as the main router. So regardless of what your connection type is, well, we support that as well. If you're going to set it as DHCP, if you need to statically set your WAN IP, or if you are using PoE, so that is supported on the system. The DNS can be configured if you're using specific VLANs that can be set as well. If you want to throttle your bandwidth, maybe for each of your WANs, you can do that too on the system. So WAN 2 by default is enabled. It's auto sensing as well, whether you're using it as LAN or WAN. But here I purposely disabled it. But once you enable your WAN port, basically then you can enable your failover or load balancing. So by default, it's set to load balance, which means it does weighted round robin to utilize both ISPs in terms of the traffic. Or you can set it over to failover mode. So it will only use your primary WAN interface that you select. And when that goes down, then it will switch to secondary LAN or your cellular connection if you have that enabled as well. We also support DNS service. So if let's say you are using a dynamic IP for your public IP, then if you want to access the ESG remotely from anywhere, then you can enable the DNS as well. So there is a list of what we support, but I believe most of what's listed right here are commonly used by clients. For the LAN side, of course, you can create multiple interfaces. You can set your own subnet. If let's say you want to create, let's say maybe 3 different IP ranges, 3 different DHCP servers, you can set that up here on the system. You can assign it through different VLANs. Let's say you're working with 1, 10, or 20 VLANs, you can set up as well. If you want to use this DHCP specifically for a VPN connection, maybe you want to isolate that environment, you can set that up too. And then, of course, you can assign which ports would support that DHCP address. Captive portal, I mentioned earlier that we support that on the system. So how does it work? If you're familiar with the captive portal that we have on the wireless access point, it works similar. So essentially, if you enable captive portal, on the wired side, everyone that will be connected will be presented with a splash page. Now, you can have authentication. It can be splash and go. Different authentications we support right now. One is ESG user. This is the internal database. Later on, I'll show you that. Then we have a custom radio server as well. If you are using an external database, we can use that database as well for authentication. Now for the splash page, this will be presented to anybody that's connected on the WAN side, or sorry, on the LAN side. Even if your access point does not support captive portal, maybe older EnGenius models or third-party access points, once the client connects on the wireless network, basically the gateway will capture that, and then it would forward the captive portal or the splash page to that specific client as well. So let's say you want to unify your authentication, you can easily do that on the system. You can also set a bandwidth limit per interface. Maybe the HCP1 have this speed, the HCP2 have this speed, so you can set that up on the system as well. So if you need to set up static routing from your public IP going to your private IP, you can set that up. If you have multiple public IPs from your ISP, you can also assign that to your system. It can be one-to-one or one-to-many, depending on your setup. For the gateway side, by the way, you would notice that we have tweaked the interface so that we can consolidate all the configuration per device. So now we have one for the gateway, one for the switch, and then one for the access point. Earlier, I talked about ESG authentication. So we've also modified a bit how authentication happens on EnGenius Cloud. So under configure, and then EnGenius authentication. So now you have all the different authentication types that we have available on the cloud. So cloud users for the wireless clients, my PSK, again, for my wireless clients using dynamic VLAN. Then we have ESG VPN clients. So the client list can be added from here. And then ESG users would be the database for captive portal for the gateway itself. On the dashboard, you would also see your gateway information, which WAN port is being utilized, and how much traffic is running. You would see the throughput as well, and some other information on the bottom. On the gateway side of things, you would have information such as your WAN IP, your public IP, which port is being utilized, what speed that port is running, and all the throughput and latency data as well. So similar with the access points, you can also review back based on historical data up to 30 days back. So LAN information would be here, like how many LAN interfaces you have created, what's the subnet, how many IPs have been utilized depending on your subnet size. So that will be displayed here. If you have clients currently getting an IP from this gateway, it will all be listed here. And you can also filter it out to make it easier to find a specific client. For client VPN, it's also easy to set up. Basically, you just have to enable client VPN. Again, this can work concurrently with site-to-site VPN. Right now, the option that we support is IPsec, but we'll be expanding this as well to add other types of options such as OpenVPN, etc. So once you have set up, let's say your host name, this can be DDNS. It can be a public IP. Sorry, let me go back. You can set the specific IP range that the client would be using for the VPN connection, DNS server, and your pre-shared key. And then authentication type can be set as well so that you have different logins per VPN client. So once you apply that, the client would be able to connect already. Either it's from a mobile phone connection, from a Windows PC, a Mac device, any type of client would be able to connect here. So long as it support the current type or encryption that you have for the VPN service. So right now we have IPsec. For the firewall side, you can add different policies. You can also apply this per VPN connection. Port forwarding can be done as well, one-to-one NAT, as well as services that you can block. We haven't added content filtering yet, but we'll be adding that in the near future through a firmware upgrade. Basically, with content filtering, you would be able to block or allow access to specific ports or applications. For instance, you want to block Facebook, on a specific LAN interface, but it works on the other LANs, you can do that from the system. So for the VPN status, it would show here if you have connections between ESG models or third-party gateways where you have linked through VPN connection. So you would see the status, how much latency you have, the current uptime of the device means the link, the subnet, and the WAN. Sadly, I won't be able to show it today because I haven't connected to any of our other peers right now. So I think there are a few questions here. Let me go over them just a while. Okay, one good question right here. Can we merge multiple WAN links as one link for wider bandwidth? So one person is asking about link aggregation on the WAN side. Sadly, we don't support that for this specific model. So the speed of the WAN ports, you won't be able to combine. But again, we support failover and load balancing, meaning you can balance out your data traffic between two of your WAN ports, but your maximum speed would be the speed that you currently have from your ISP. Another question here is pertaining to dual WAN as well. So the dual WAN ports, are they only available in round robin, or can you set one as primary and one as slave or active and slave setup? So yes, that would be the failover function. So while WAN 1 or WAN 2 is your active WAN port, if it goes offline for some reason, maybe from the ISP or the cable got unplugged, then your secondary WAN would replace that as an active port. So we support round robin as well as a failover or active slave setup. Okay, another question here is regarding the cellular connectivity. Would it be better to have a slim slot embedded on the router or a USB slot? So one advantage to having a USB slot is support. Well, we know that in terms of modems, cellular connectivity, there may be a lot of compatibility between the SIM, the ISP, and the hardware manufacturer as well. So to reduce that compatibility issue, we made it so that the connection would be through the USB port. So you can easily plug any type of dongle for that cellular connection. Okay, another question here is for authentication. Does the ESG support LDAP authentication? At the moment, I think on launch, it won't be supported yet. But since we have this available on the rest of our product lineup, it's going to be available through a firmware upgrade as well. So most likely we'll be adding LDAP support, AD support, Google LDAP support, as well as Windows Azure support as well. Will the ESG support SD-WAN configuration? SD-WAN out of the box, it's not going to be supported by the ESG510, but it is already on the roadmap. We are planning to implement SD-WAN as well. But I can't confirm whether that would be on our current lineup or is there going to be a specific hardware for SD-WAN. But we'll be giving more information maybe roughly end of the year or early next year. Okay, another question right here is, will the gateway be available in virtual appliances? The team have tried to weigh it before whether it's better to have a virtual gateway like a service, such as the offerings from AWS, or a hardware-based solution. There are pros and cons for having what different types of gateway, either a virtual appliance or hardware base. And the team have decided to stick with the hardware base because of all the pros that you can have with it. But if you need like a breakdown, maybe we can come up with that as well in the future. One person asking about pricing. So yeah, if you need a specific pricing for your region, please approach your local sales representatives from EnGenius or the local distributors. One person is asking about the mounting. Is this rack mountable? So the ESG510 is desktop. The upcoming ESG610 is also desktop. And then the ESG620, the one that comes with 8 ports and 2 SFP slots, is rack mountable. Okay, another question is pertaining to the VPN. Um, will you confirm if you can establish VPN connection between devices throughout the cloud? Even branch IP from ISP is not public. Maybe you're using a private IP. Sorry, not private IP. Maybe you are behind the net. I think that's what you're asking. So even if the ESG is behind the net, the VPN functionality would work as well. So you can utilize the functions such as auto traversal so that it will take care of the port forwarding for you. You can also set it as a DMZ if, let's say, you have control on the main router to allow everything to pass through. So it depends on the connection. But if you're using all ESG devices that you are establishing to VPN connections, it will be a lot easier in terms of linking it. Another question is pertaining to the rack mount as well. So ESG510 is desktop. Only the ESG620 will be rack mount at the moment. What licensing is required for the ESG510? So similar with the rest of our products, we have different licensing depending on the functions that we have. At the moment, we have few functions enabled, which falls under the Pro license. Most of the features that I've shown just now still fall under the basic license on the cloud. And again, if you are purchasing an ESG510, it still comes with a 1-year free Pro license trial so that you'll be able to fully utilize the functions. After performing configuration, does it require a reboot of the ESG? For all the configurations that I have applied based on my testing, it does not require a reboot of the system. So you can just push the setting on the unit itself. Okay, another question pertains to the VPN. Is there a specific client VPN that is required for the system? So one nice thing about client VPN is that it can support any form of system so long as it supports the same type of encryption. So for IPsec, for example, Windows has a VPN client. You can use that. Linux has one as well. You can use that as well. iOS, iPhones, or Mac OS, it has a native IPsec VPN client as well. So basically, all you need to do is point to the gateway and then key in your pre-shared key. If you have an account for the VPN system, you have to log in as well. And that's it. So the rest would just link. Another question is any web or email filter feature. At the moment, we don't have that yet on the system, but we plan to add content filtering to enhance the control over the firewall feature that we have. Another question is, can we have dual ESG deployment in an active setup? Can you elaborate a bit in terms of that deployment? So licensing details. So yeah, we don't have a breakdown yet on what functions fall under Pro and Basic, but majority of the functions that I've shown today falls under the Basic license. Another question here is, can you access the USB cellular modem configuration page via IP when on the network? Good question. I haven't actually tried the USB connection if I'm able to access this interface. But by right, you should be able to access that through the network as well, so long as it has a IP. Further intrusion prevention and web filter, does it need an additional license? So most likely, like we have for EnGenius AirGuard, our WIDS, WIPS system for our security access point, the IDS and IPS function for this EnGenius security gateway will most likely require the Pro license as well. But that's not confirmed. Everything will be confirmed once we have the full information on licensing. Who are we competing against? So one thing about the cloud gateway is that there are very little players in the market that does this. So most of the time, gateways, firewalls, VPNs, depending on what their main function is, usually that's how they brand it, are non-cloud, meaning they have to be managed locally or maybe through a local system. So the EnGenius Cloud Gateway, EnGenius Cloud Security Gateway, is a centralized managed cloud-based gateway. It has multiple multi-G support on the LAN side. In terms of competition, maybe um I'm not sure even if I can mention them right now, but there is little competition on the market. If you try to search those specific features that we have on the system, then you would straight away know right away. But in terms of the pricing, it's very competitive, especially in terms of licensing. Most other players, when they charge for licensing and support, it can be hundreds, it can be thousands right away, just to provide support on the system. If you want to enable, let's say, VPN, it may be an additional license for them, depending on how many clients you have for the VPN system. So with EnGenius Cloud, you have less worries in terms of that. And I can guarantee in terms of the pricing, spec to spec on the hardware wise, we are on the competitive side. Does the gateway support QoS? Yes, we do support QoS, but I don't have that on the interface right now. But we can show that once we have fully launched the system next month. Question regarding the licensing here. After the 1 year period, we need to purchase for the renewal. So in terms of warranty, like RMA replacement, you may contact our local distributors because we may have different policies depending on the region. So please contact them regarding that, or you can contact our local sales as well for the warranty. WAN aggregation, is it supported? Sadly, we don't support WAN aggregation. We only support failover and load balancing so that we have full redundancy. WAN aggregation is when you combine multiple WAN ports to have a bigger throughput. It's a good feature, but it can be more costly as well if we add that functionality inside. Maybe on our future models, I can't tell. But yeah, as of the moment, we support load balancing and failover. Will there be a centralized support for the gateway? So similar to the cloud solution, we have intercom. So intercom is readily available 24/7. So if you have any issues, similar with our APSense switches, you may contact us through intercom as well. So when you log in the gateway interface from the cloud, you would have the intercom button there too. So what is the retail pricing for 620? Sadly, I don't have the MSRP yet for the ESG620, but we'll release the information on that once we get closer to the launch. So right now, I only have the pricing data for the ESG510. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I think I can share some more information in terms of the sessions. But this may be subject to change, but you can get that information once we launch our data sheet. Basically, for the firewall throughput, SPI, firewall stateful firewall packet inspection, it's about 4 gigs of data. The routing throughput for the ESG510 is roughly 9 gigabits per second. VPN throughput is about 1 gig. Maximum TCP concurrent sessions, 1 million. Maximum concurrent IPsec VPN tunnels. So this is if you have multiple VPN connections and all that. So we support 100 tunnels out of the box. IPsec VPN clients, it supports 5 out of the box. If you need more than that, we can support a total of 200 IPsec VPN clients on the ESG510. So, but yeah, those numbers may be subject to change. But yeah, we'll detail the full information once we release our data sheet. By the way, in terms of those throughput, those are tested through iPerf, iMix, which is regulated through RFC 2554 as well. So this is standard across different brands. Okay, guys, any other follow-up questions before we end the session today? Okay, question here regarding the VPN connection. Does it need a static public IP for a VPN, or does the VPN connection meet on EnGenius Cloud server? So depending on your setup, if you're using all EnGenius devices, you don't have to use a public IP. The system, the cloud itself, since EnGenius Cloud knows the WAN IP of the device, it will basically update your EnGenius gateways on the current WAN IP, IP forwarding port forwarding information for the rest of your gateway. So it will automatically sync. So it's self-healing, so no need to manually have a public IP. If you're using a third-party gateway, you may have to use a public IP, sorry, a static public IP. But if you're using a dynamic public IP, you can utilize a DDNS service as well. With EnGenius gateways, again, another advantage is that if your EnGenius gateway is behind a router, let's say you have double NAT or triple NAT, so we also support auto traversal so that the system would navigate on its own. You don't have to worry about how to set up the VPN through that double NAT connection. If you're using all EnGenius cloud devices for the gateway side, then it would just be automatic. It's as simple as enabling the function. Okay, another question here is internal policies, will they still work if all WAN connections were down? So yes. So all the settings are stored on the gateway itself. So even if your internet is down, so they would still work. Another question here is, can you connect two gateways together in a active or active passive setup? So yeah, you may set it up that way as well. Depending on how you interlink your WAN links going to the LAN data. So you can also set it up that way. So on its own, it already acts as an active or active passive connection based on the dual WAN ports that you have. Okay, so I think I've answered most of your guys' questions. If you need more information about EnGenius Cloud Security Gateway, you may head over to engenius.ai. We have just added a new section there, which links to more information about the EnGenius Cloud Security Gateways. I think right now we only have this model up there, but we'll be updating it to add the rest of the lineup once we have or move closer to the launch. Also, the data sheets will be available through there as well once we have it ready. So if no more further questions, that would end the session today. If you came in late, you may access a recording of this webinar through EnGenius Academy. So EnGenius academy.ai, you'd be able to see information there. Sorry, it's academy.engenius.ai. So all our past webinars across different RBUs from EnGenius Singapore, EnGenius Europe, EnGenius US, all the information would be there. You can also utilize the portal to get certifications for EnGenius. So currently on EnGenius Academy, we have trainings for switching, trainings for wireless, as well as a future training for the gateway system as well. So please have a look on EnGenius Academy. Another question is pertaining, sorry, last question. Is there any plans to improve the cloud user interface? So yeah, from time to time, we've actually been modifying the EnGenius Cloud portal. I think from the moment that we launched it until today, there have been almost by, I think every month or every 2 months, we add functions on the cloud. Sometimes we change information. We change how you navigate the system to optimize it, to make it easier for clients to understand what's going on. But yeah, EnGenius Cloud is our focus product right now. So you would see a lot of improvements or changes from time to time on the interface, not just on the local side, but also on the cloud portal as well. Of course, this includes the Cloud to Go application. So yeah, thank you guys for attending today's webinar. You all have a good day. Thank you.